When learning about the anatomy of the body, understanding directional terms is useful. Terms are used to describe the orientation of the body parts and regions of the body. For example, body planes are imaginary lines that are drawn through the body to separate the body into sections. So it would give you an idea of where certain parts are located in which planes. Body cavities are spaces within the body containing vital organs. So body planes are referred to as either frontal, coronal, transverse planes, oblique, and sagittal planes. In this diagram, the frontal or coronal it's an imaginary line that separates the body into the front side and the back side, or anterior and posterior. The transverse separates the body into top and bottom. An oblique, which is not shown here, but it separates the body on an angle. So it's a plane that comes in at an angle, separating the body. And sagittal, which separates the body into a left and right side. Another directional terms refers to body cavities. Body cavities are the spaces that hold vital organs. The cranial cavity houses the brain. The vertebral cavity houses the spinal column, spinal cord. The thoracic cavity is where the lungs are housed. The abdominal cavity, the digestive organs, and the pelvic cavity, which refer to the reproductive organs. So those are pretty straightforward. Directional terms are terms that describe the actual position, and usually they have opposite meaning: anterior, posterior, medial, and lateral. Medial is toward the midline, lateral is away from the midline. Proximal is toward the midline of the body, and distal is away. And also anterior and posterior are directional terms, which refer to front and back. In the next unit, or in the same unit, we were discussing digestion and nutrition. The digestive system is responsible for the breakdown of food. So breaking down macromolecules into their component parts, or their monomers, so carbohydrates being broken down into monosaccharides, they're simple as sugars, proteins breaking down into amino acids so that the body can use them and absorb them. They can't be absorbed or used in the form that they are in, so they need to be digested or catabolized and broken down into their component parts. So our bodies require nutrients, vitamins, and minerals as well, to maintain the proper function of our organ systems. The highlight of digestion tends to be eating, especially when you're eating something yummy like an ice cream, and necessary but not so pleasurable, the excretion of waste products. So digestion is dependent upon the specialized organs that make up the digestive system, and moving that food through the system as a way of obtaining the nutrients and absorbing those through the digestive system. So we know that the needs of human body are water, food, oxygen, water, because all chemical reactions that take place within the body require water. Food, as I just discussed, needing the food for nutrients, and oxygen for cellular respiration. In this diagram, you can see that these are the major organs of the digestive system. They're the organs and also the accessory organs of the digestive system. The large liver is pretty prominent here at the top. The liver is the largest organ inside the body. It makes bile, which is a fluid that helps break down fats and gets rid of wastes in the body. It changes food into energy, and it also helps in detoxifying poisons within the body. Right below the liver is the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a very small accessory organ that stores the bile that's produced in the liver, and it's secreted into the small intestine to digest fats. The stomach here is a J-shaped organ. It is composed of a very thick wall with cells that secrete hydrochloric acid. So the hydrochloric acid helps to digest the food. It secretes enzymes that help break down parts of the components of the food. It also performs mechanical digestion, which is the churning of the food or the chyme that is present in the stomach. Digestion actually starts in the salivary glands, at 3 different salivary glands in the mouth, and mechanical digestion occurs there through the chopping of the food into a bolus with the teeth. Your salivary glands also secrete enzymes to break down carbohydrates, so it secretes amylase, which is specifically used to break down carbohydrates. Then that food is pushed with the tongue down to this tube here called the esophagus. The esophagus pushes that bolus of food through a rhythmic muscle contraction called peristalsis. This ribbon-shaped structure is the pancreas, critical in the process of digesting food because it releases a lot of the digestive enzymes in order to break down the food. So the pancreas is considered a gland, and it makes enzymes for the digestion and the hormone insulin, which helps the body turn food into energy. The small intestine is the organ where most of the digestion occurs and most of the absorption. This is all the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum, and that's where a lot of the chemical digestion takes place. The large intestines, it's also called the colon. It absorbs water and sodium from the stool. So most of the water absorption and vitamin absorption occurs in the large intestine or the colon. These are some examples of enzymes that are secreted and what they digest. So carbohydrate digestion starts with the salivary glands releasing amylase. Pancreatic enzyme amylase also breaks down carbohydrates in the small intestine. Maltase is another enzyme secreted in the small intestine. It breaks down carbohydrates. Proteins are digested. Pepsin is produced by the gastric glands in the stomach, and that digests proteins. Trypsin and peptidases are also enzymes that digest proteins. And fat digestion, lipase is produced by the pancreas, and the small site of the small intestine is where lipase is active, and it breaks down fat. The next topic were cells. So cells are the basic unit of structure and function of all living things, and cells give rise to other cells. That's part of the cell theory through the process of cell division. There are 2 different types of cells. We can break them into 2 different categories: prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells tend to be the more premature or primitive cells. The example would be like this bacterial cell. They do not contain a nucleus. That's one of the major distinguishing features between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. They do not contain a nucleus. However, they do contain genetic material. The DNA is just wound up and coiled loose in the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is this fluid-like material which suspends all the organelles. So basically, they don't have any membrane-bound organelles. So that's another distinguishing characteristic. A eukaryotic cell, or plant or animal cells, contain all of the organelles that you studied in this unit. They're membrane-bound, which means they're surrounded by a membrane. One of the structures that the prokaryotic cell has are ribosomes. So some of the things that these 2 cells share in common are ribosomes, cytoplasm, DNA, and a cell membrane or a plasma membrane, okay, that surrounds them. But one basic thing to remember is that prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus, eukaryotic cells do. The cell membrane that surrounds all cells and all membrane-bound organelles is composed of a lipid bilayer. So it's made up of a lipid, these fatty acid tails, which are part of the fat, and then these little circular red things at the top are hydrophilic. They like water. So the way the cell membrane is formed, it's formed in a bilayer because there's water, lots of water on the outside of the cell and lots of water on the inside. So it forms this protective layer that allows only certain things to enter and exit the cell. So basically, the organelles act like little organs keeping the cell alive. I'm not going to go over all the parts of the organelle, but all the organelles, but make sure you review the organelles and what they do within the cell. And cells give rise to tissues, so groups of cells give rise to tissues. So example of a tissue, one of the tissues is the nervous tissue. The nervous make up the nervous system, the nervous cells. They are functioning for communication throughout the body. The connective tissues, cushion and protection. They contain the protein collagen, which is found in skin and other areas. An example of connective tissues would be your adipose tissue. They're used for protection and insulation. Cartilage, connective tissue, which I was just reviewing, and bone are examples of those connective tissues. Bone are characterized by these rings called Haversian canals, which are tiny little canals that house the nerves and house blood vessels within there. And they also contain cells that are called osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and osteocytes. And they all function together to maintain the composition and structure of the bone. Another type of tissue considered connective tissue are blood, muscle tissues, and then there's epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues are broken down into 4 various types. Depending on the location and the structure of those epithelial cells will determine what they do. Their structure will determine what they do. So a simple cuboidal epithelial cells, a simple one single layer shaped in this cube shape, which surrounds the kidney. Our skin cells have a very different texture, different type of epithelial cells, and these would be your apical surface epithelials or surface epithelial cells. These are more columnar in shape. This is what would be found in the respiratory tract. And this type of striated squamous epithelial are found in the esophagus. So the structure has a lot to do with the function and where they're located, as is everything in anatomy and physiology. Hope that's helpful.